Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into CAEL Live. Today, we're going to find out how to prep for your academic English language test. Hello again. My name is Ashwati, and if you're joining us for the first time, CAEL Live is an interactive series where we guide you through your journey to Canada as an international student. We talk about international student life, admissions, and much more. We will also, of course, be talking about the CAEL test, like today, for instance. So if you're an international student looking for guidance, please subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to be notified about our new episodes. In today's episode, we have a familiar face. If you have been following us on here, you will recognize Brandy, who is the expert here on CAEL Test, and she also provides lessons on our other playlist, CAEL Prep with Brandy. Today, she will be talking to us about how you can do some basic everyday exercises to prepare for your CAEL test. These are things you can do outside of your usual test preparation. Let's go say hello to her today. Sorry. Hi, Brandy. Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
Hi, Ashwati. I'm well, thank you. It's nice to be here to have a chat about how to prepare for the CAEL test. So thanks for having me on.
Wonderful. That is always great to hear. I'm going to get started with the questions for today. If you guys who are watching, if you have any questions, please let us know in the comments below. Okay, Brandy. To start off, what are some steps I can take to familiarize myself with the test format before I even start preparing?
Yes, and it's a really good idea to get familiar with what the test is going to look like and how it fits together. And also to learn how you're going to use the computer and the online features to complete the test. So before you even think of practicing English, I would highly recommend you maybe tune in. First of all, we've got a free webinar that we deliver. It's called CAEL Get the Facts, and it's going to walk you through the beginning of the CAEL test all the way to the end. And again, focus on the overview. So there are 5 parts of CAEL, and you'll learn which language skills you're going to be studying. You'll learn what types of questions you'll be answering and how to even navigate the computer tools in order to input your answers and things like that. So I think that's the first step. After you've had a chance to look at the overview, I guess, of the test, the next thing I would recommend you try is to look at the free practice test that's on the website. So when you go to cael.ca, there is one free practice test there. Again, I wouldn't worry so much about answering the questions or doing the test. I would just start that test and flip through the screens so you can see firsthand exactly what the screens look like. You'll locate where the timer is and see how much time you've got to answer and so on. So all of this is going to just it starts you at the starting line of your like long preparation race to the finish for when you actually take the test. So those are 2 good starting points, I'd say.
Sorry, guys, I was mute. I was telling Brandy that I would agree with her in that those are really good starting points. Consider doing that if you're just learning about the CAEL test and you want to understand how the test works. Next question. How can creating a routine help you study for the CAEL test?
Yeah, so we've all been there, I think. If you remember a class you've taken in school where you've got that big exam coming up tomorrow and you open your textbook tonight and then you panic and stress because it's not possible to learn all that material in such a short amount of time. We've all been there. I will admit once in a while that's happened to me too, I confess. To avoid doing that, I think what we need to do is establish some sort of a routine. Even by taking the step of creating maybe a half an hour window of every day where you're going to set that time aside just for yourself to focus on your studies before, again, you even start learning the language and practicing your skills. Just creating that routine, it makes you feel proactive. It makes you feel like you're accomplishing something, and it boosts the confidence and the self-esteem. It really does support your mental health more positively. So there's no stress anymore of worrying about cramming to the last minute. So you know you're taking steps to ensure your own success. And when you're in charge of your own journey, you're going to find that you reach that finish line with a lot more ease, a lot less stress. So just creating that routine alone, I think, is going to help you immensely. Again, it boils down to time management. So what I would do to establish this routine is, first of all, look ahead to how many weeks of study you have before that test. We all are planning on taking the test at different times. So if you look ahead and see that you've got 8 weeks now to prepare before your test date has been registered for, then you can do some time management. You can look at how much time you want to devote to studying each skill. So again, by having that routine in place, you're going to reassure yourself that you're leaving yourself time to go over writing, reading, speaking, listening. Again, spread those skills out and the practice out to ensure that you've covered all those areas so there are no surprises come test day. So just having that routine in place, again, is going to help you with your time management and take away the worry of not having enough time to prepare to be successful.
Thank you. And since you're talking about routine, I want to delve a little deeper into it. What does a routine really look like? How can we help students form a routine for themselves?
Yeah, so now we're all different. I think we're all alert at different times of the day. I know I myself, I'm a morning person. So I get up and I start work right at 8 o'clock sharp. And that's where my best ideas come from. You yourself, you might be a night owl and you might be alert and awake at 10 p.m. at night when I'm falling asleep. So the first thing we should do, I think, is pick the time of the day where you are most alert, where you're available, first off, when you don't have school or work or family obligations. But make sure you set that side of time without interruption. Let your friends and family know, for example, that this is my study time, don't interrupt. So let's just say it's the morning. We'll go with my preference. So 8 a.m. to 8:30, that would be my study time every day before my work day or my school day starts. So once you've established that time, I would keep your routine, your study time brief each and every day. So say 30 minutes tops. All right. It's so much better to learn a little bit of information each day instead of doing, say, 3 hours of work in one day. The brain's not formulated to retain all of that information. So if you overload it, I don't think you're going to retain that info as well. You might burn yourself out too. If you're studying 3 hours a day, first of all, that's not so much fun. Secondly, again, you're going to exhaust yourself if you're trying to maintain that routine for weeks and weeks on end. So keep it short, but keep it focused. Go into your study routine knowing exactly what it is you want to cover that day. Don't just open a book and start reading. That's not studying. That's just passively looking at information. So I think once you've established the time of day that you want to study, again, sort of set that routine. Maybe alternate your focus. This is what I would recommend. So maybe on Monday, you're taking a half an hour to practice your writing skills. So this might be complex sentence structure. That's the one skill, the one focus you're going to do today. Please don't try to cover vocabulary development, sentence structure, paragraph writing, thesis statements. You can't do that in a half an hour. You're just going to confuse yourself, probably frustrate yourself too. So pick a focus. Again, maybe it's sentence structure today. Maybe that's your weakness and you want to work on that. Great. 30 minutes today on complex sentence writing. You put it away after 30 minutes is done. The next day when you come back to your study session, I would recommend alternating with a slightly different skill. Maybe then that day you're looking at vocabulary. So you're reviewing your vocab skills. When that day is finished, 30 minutes is gone, you put that away. The next day, here's where it gets interesting. You combine those skills together. You're back to your writing now, but you're going to then add in some of those vocabulary words you were learning about yesterday. So by alternating your skills day to day over the week, say it's writing, vocab, something like that, you can change up. Maybe it's sentence structure here, paragraph writing, maybe the next day, that's fine. Maybe then in week 2, you're on to alternating, say, reading and speaking. Those are 2 other areas that will be covered on the test. So in 1.5 hour study session, you could easily read through a short academic text, start to understand the main ideas and so on. And then maybe the next day when you're studying, you're on to your speaking and you're going to talk all about what you learned reading yesterday. So then day 3 comes along and you're back to reading, continuing that article or perhaps starting a new one. So now you're alternating these skills. So I think by alternating your skills and combining them, you're doing 2 things. You're keeping it fresh for yourself. Again, I'll ask Ashwati a question here. Do you do a lot of cooking at home?
I do, yes.
Yeah, I do as well. Now, have you ever made a gigantic casserole or a big pot of stew or say for supper, and you've got enough for 5 meals out of that pot? Have you ever done that?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it helps, right? What happens when you get to day 5 and you're still eating that stew?
Oh, it gets really boring.
No kidding. You don't look forward to eating that pot of stew anymore. It's the same thing with studying. If you're going to practice the same thing over and over again, you're probably not going to want to sit down to study the next day. You're going to procrastinate. You're going to get distracted texting your friends, or you're going to go out for a walk or something like that. So again, keep it fresh for yourself so that you're not bored doing the same thing day in, day out. but look for ways to combine the learning that you're doing. That's how an efficient studier is going to do it. Okay, don't practice these skills individually. Don't spend hours and hours just looking at vocab. Learn a few new words and then move on to actually actively producing those words, whether it's in your writing or your speaking. Because remember, the CAEL test is going to ask you to show your skills in all areas of writing, speaking, listening, and reading. And the test will ask you to combine these skills. So you will be asked to read a long passage and then speak about what you learned, for example. So if you are already incorporating these formats and structures into your study routine, just a half hour each day, say for 2 months even leading up to your test, I think you'll find yourself feeling much more prepared, and there will be fewer surprises come test day. So that's the whole point behind a routine. It's literally to set that groundwork so that you're as prepared as you can be for test day.
Those are great tips. Actually, I'm hoping that you guys, if you're watching, grab a pen and paper and then note this down, because it's something that you can keep in mind and keep practicing. I think the fact that alternating topics, I think that's a great idea. I don't know why I hadn't ever thought of that before. I think it will work really well. And you did mention vocabulary, and so we will be going through different aspects of listening, reading, and writing and speaking over the course of this conversation. But I did want to start with vocabulary because that's one of the more popular topics. So what are some ways I can build my vocabulary in a systematic way?
Yeah, vocab development is going to certainly help your writing and your speaking and your reading, I guess, and your listening. There's all skills, because you have to understand what you're hearing or taking in. And then you have to also be able to produce your own words. So vocabulary is a good starting point. We get that question all the time. Well, how do I improve it? Reading academic texts and listening to public speakers, say the news or podcasts at an academic level, they will introduce you to new words. So that's a starting point. But then you have to decide how you're going to learn what those words mean. And you're going to have to put the time into actively producing that language. We can't just sit back and listen to these words and think that we've learned them. That's not the way that the brain, I think, is going to retain that information. So one strategy that's worked well for me in the past, I'll share. I know French is my second language. I started learning that when I was in grade 6. I had a fantastic teacher. And what he did with us in school is he made us each have a little spiraled notebook, right? Mine had a green cover, nice and shiny. So it's kind of attractive to go to. I was eager to open that book and write my new words in as a 12-year-old child, I guess. You can use whatever color of notebook you want for this. You can use an Excel spreadsheet. You can use index cards, whatever works. But find one resource where you can keep a list of all of these new academic words that you're coming into contact with. What I would recommend you try is to set your goal for maybe 2, maximum 3 new words in that one day. So again, if you're sitting down for a vocabulary study session, maybe you're reading a shorter academic text, hopefully within that text, you'll understand the gist of the article. So there should be words and phrases there that you already understand, but there should be words that are new to you. This is the whole point. Don't read something that you understand fully, because you're not developing your vocab. Pick a text that's in the middle. Again, you get the point, you get the gist, but there should be some words that are completely new to you, or even phrases. I would recommend you let's start with 2, just to keep it easy. So pick 2 new words. The first thing that I would start with, this is the way I was taught, so I'll share with you, is we look at the word in the sentence, just isolate it all by itself. So you're identifying the word, look at how long it is, look at how many syllables or parts are in that word. Notice the spelling patterns. All right, so you're looking at the word, memorizing the spelling. Is there a double L? Is there an ER ending? What have you? Once you've sort of isolated that word and almost taken a picture of it with your mind, if you will, as you're looking, go back and read the whole sentence of that text. So that new word now, hopefully you're able to at least guess what part of the sentence it's describing. So figure out, is this new vocabulary word, is this the action part of the sentence? So in other words, is this the verb? And knowing that's going to help you figure out what the people in the sentence are doing, maybe. Or perhaps this word that you're trying to figure out, maybe it's describing a word nearby. So you're guessing that it's likely used as an adjective or a descriptive word. So try to guess, again, that part of speech. In other words, what's the purpose of this word in this sentence? Do I need to know it, understand the whole thing? So once you've done that, you're hopefully guessing what that word means. This is where it now comes time to write that new word down in your notebook. just the word itself, okay? I would probably try to do it without looking at the text. See if you can remember the spelling. Write your word out, double check you've spelled it correctly. This is where I would then go to even an online dictionary, even Google the word to look up the official meaning or definition. All right, read through the definition and double check with yourself if you had guessed correctly what the meaning of that word was. Okay, you might be right, you might be wrong, but at least now you got the true definition. So I would read the sentence again with that true definition in mind to fully understand what that word means. Okay, now in your notebook beside this new word you've written, I would also then write the definition out. But here's where it's challenging. I would not copy the definition word for word from that dictionary you're using. When we're just copying information down, again, we're not processing, we're not retaining. So if you can paraphrase, explain what this word means in your own words, as simple as you need to. You don't have to be academic here. This is your own personal dictionary. Your whole point is just to know what this word means. So keep your definition as simple and short as possible, but make sure that you've written out enough description there that you understand what that word means. I would also use that dictionary to find synonyms. So there should be some other words that mean the same as that new word that you've written down. Usually a dictionary will give you a huge list. Okay, now don't write down 10 synonyms. That's not helping. That's overloading. Choose a couple words there that are already familiar to you. Don't choose a word you don't understand. That's confusing the situation. So find some synonyms there, words you've heard before and you know what they mean. You say, oh, that's what this new word means. So you would list then those synonyms underneath the definition. Okay, and to cap it all off, to consolidate your learning, meaning to really sort of burn that new word and its meaning into your mind, I would then try my best, if I were you, to write out your own sentence construction using that word. So you've seen the dictionary give you some samples. You now know what the word means. So try your best to create your own sentence using that word correctly. All right, so by using all of these strategies, by looking, by speaking the word out loud, by spelling, by writing the sentences, you're doing so many different productive skills with this one word. And that's what the repetition there of that routine is what's going to help you, I think, retain the memory of that word. So that takes a little bit of time. You'll probably spend 8 to 10 minutes on that one word, I would say, if you follow those steps. So in your half-hour study session, you might have time to do 2 new words for today. And that's a good goal to have, I think. So once you've included 2, maximum 3 words, that's enough to remember for one day. I would put your notebook aside, call it a day, go have fun, go do something else. When you return to that notebook the next time you study your vocab, before you start adding to the list, I'd like you to review what you did the day before. So take a quick second, skim read over your own notes, look at those words, look at the notes you've made, look away from the text and see if you can, again, produce that the meaning of that word. You can say a sentence out loud, you can try to write it out, at least spell the word down without looking. So if you can prove to yourself that you remember what those words meant from yesterday, that's when you're ready to start adding new words. If you sit down and you forget the meanings of those words from yesterday, that's okay. Review them, take the time to go through the list, maybe practice writing more sentences again with those new words, and then that's your study session for the day. Do not add more words to the list until you have mastered the ones that are already there. And this is where I've seen a lot of my own students in class go a little bit off the rails, as we say. So some of them finish a course with 100 new words in this notebook. It's great, but they can only really remember and use correctly, say 4 or 5 of those words. So there's not much point in keeping a gigantic list of words when you don't even know what they mean. So again, it's quality, not quantity when you're building your vocab. So just sort of step by step, as many times as you need to review, learn those new words and build on them. If you can add 2 new academic words every time you're looking at your vocab, I think that's going to do wonders then to gradually, bit by bit, expand this academic vocabulary. And it's clearly not going to happen overnight. A good question I get from a lot of my online webinar viewers, maybe some of you, is, my test is in 2 weeks. How should I practice my vocab? I say, well, you can practice these skills we've been doing, but in 2 weeks, how many words do you expect you're going to be able to learn? Probably not near as many as you'd like. So you really need to plan sort of a chunk of time, at least a couple, 3 months or so before the test is a really good way to start building those vocab skills. So I know that's a really long-winded answer, but I wanted to give you lots of ideas about how you might go about building these words. Yeah, whatever words you're learning, use them. Don't just stuff them away in your notebook and put it away for the day. Every chance you get, whether you're talking with friends, phone your mom on the phone and strike up a conversation and try inserting these academic words into the conversation. I don't know.
That's hilarious.
You'd impress your mom. She'd probably say, "What does that mean? What are you talking about?" But do something to use these words once you've learned them, because the more you use them, the easier it is that you'll remember them forever, not just for the test, right? Because that's the whole point, to develop the vocab. So anyway, food for thought.
So we have a couple of questions here in the comments, and we do have a few other questions that I've prepared for you. But this one is from Jimmy. I think the first question they asked was, what is the most common accent in the test?
Okay, so when you're listening to all of the questions in the test itself, there will be several different listening passages, like lectures. All of the people speaking will have quote unquote Canadian accents. So for example, I was born and raised in Northern Ontario, and then I moved to Vancouver here in BC about 17 years ago. So I've lived in 2 provinces over my years. And so born and raised here, my accent is typically Canadian. I don't know how else to describe that. So if you can understand what I'm saying, you won't have any trouble understanding the speakers on the test itself when you're listening to those lectures. So there are no other accents whatsoever. You will not hear British, you will not hear Australian. All of the English speakers on the CAEL test speak in typically native Canadian accents. So that will reassure you to focus your ears and your listening skills on the Canadian accent only. For fun, you can get familiar with other accents, but for CAEL, it's not necessary. It's just the Canadian accent.
Great. And another question that he's asked, and feel free to answer this however you feel comfortable. Which do you think are the most common mistakes Latin people make when speaking?
Oh, geez, that is a good question. Now, let me think. Oh, gosh, it's been a long time since I've taught a huge class of people from South. I can't even give you like a common mistake. I guess with pronunciation, sometimes I noticed it's sort of how we connect the words. And this isn't typical to Latin, but when we're learning English as an additional language, I think sometimes the blending of the sounds between words gets a little bit skewed. So in some languages, we drop sounds. In other languages, we add an extra sound in. So for example, a word ending with ing, if we were to say boring, hopefully not, but if that's their word, some speakers might say boring, that kind of thing. So it sort of depends on whatever your first language was. It will influence the way you're pronouncing your words. But yeah, I can't give you sort of the common mistake that a lot of Latin speakers make. But that's one thing, is just to look at where you're stressing the words, where the strong part of the word is to pronounce, but also how to connect or blend the words together in a fluent, natural way without sort of cutting sounds off or without adding extra sounds in. Those are things for everybody, regardless of what language is your first language, to look out for, I'd say.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. And I hope that helped you, Jimmy. Feel free to ask any more questions that you're curious to know about, and Brandy will be answering them for you. Okay, so moving on to the next question that we have prepared for you. What are the daily tasks that I may already be doing as a part of my daily activity that could help me practice my writing?
Yeah, that's a great question, because again, if you're already speaking and writing day to day, you're already ahead of the game with that routine. The one thing I would mention is that, remember, CAEL is an academic test. So what this means is everything you write or speak about in the test has to be done in complete sentences that use academic language and more complex structures. So with that in mind, if you are, emailing friends or texting with friends, that's great. But remember, when you're texting somebody, you're probably using short forms and slang and idioms. So unfortunately, texting and things like that will really not prepare you for the CAEL test, being academic. If you are keeping a journal, though, some of us like to, write down, reflect on our day and write that down. If you don't keep a journal, maybe this is a good time to start. So you take a few 5 minutes of your daily routine and, just jot down what your goals are for that day, or something happened that made you laugh, write it down. But as you're writing, really focus on creating those complex sentences. It's okay to use some short, simple sentences for CAEL, but for the most part, you're aiming for complex academic. So longer sentences that are connected together. I think if you already work as in a job, if you're working right now in some sort of a business job working with clients, so if you're already emailing clients back and forth, that would be a good practice actually, because you must use your professional business writing skills in order to communicate with these important clients and accounts. So again, if you're fortunate enough to have that hands-on day-to-day experience, that's great. It's really going to help your writing and speaking too, because whatever you're writing about, you can think about how you'd speak about them. But yeah, you have to find a way to focus on the academic though, whatever you're doing. Yeah, and same with speaking. Again, with your friends, you're having casual conversations. That's great. Don't stop doing that. But find a friend if you can who's studying for CAEL and try to engage in a topic for 10 minutes and use sophisticated language to try to impress each other, but to keep that conversation going. So again, it's just a matter.
Speaking of academics, since you brought this up, I just wanted to throw this into the mix as well, because we're making sure that this is an academic English learning experience. What are some examples of academic English that a student can listen to in their day-to-day?
Yeah, so I know a lot of people like podcasts. I myself, I'm having a hard time getting into them because my mind wanders. Yeah, my mind wanders. It never shuts off. So I listen and then I daydream and I tune out, have to come back. So I'm working on that skill, everybody. Me too. Teachers have to practice our listening sometimes. But I'd recommend, I think podcasts are a really nice way to start because it's on your own time. So wherever you get your podcast from is a good starting point. I have a Spotify account, so I can access many, many podcasts there. I think tip number one is to pick a topic that you're interested in. Again, you can imagine sitting through someone's class in school where it bored you to tears, and we don't listen, we don't learn when we're bored and disinterested in the topic. So instead, pick something that really excites you. I'm training to run a marathon in May. I will share that. So exercise and keeping physically healthy, that right now is a topic for me. So that would be my podcast because it applies to me personally. And I'm so interested to learn how I can train myself physically and so on to do this 42.2 kilometer race that I'm going to run in May. So find your own interest, right? That's step number one. Remember on the CAEL test, the topics that you'll be reading about or listening to as well are going to be based on first year arts and science backgrounds from university. The CAEL test, one of the purposes to take it, as you know, is to enter post-secondary Canadian school. Mm-hmm. So any major you can think of studying. So for me, it was English. I became an English teacher. Ashwati, what did you major in when you did yours?
I majored in design.
Okay, so there you go. That would be one. Astronomy, I'm thinking of questions I've seen on our practice test, engineering, civil law. That's a really popular one. A lot of test takers are applying for the ICCRC. So a lot of them are interested in law and immigration consultant. So again, pick something that's interesting to you but applicable, but you would probably kill two birds with one stone. Do you know that expression? Meaning you're using your time wisely by picking sort of a topic that would be possibly on the CAEL test. The content would be different, but at least you're familiarizing yourself sort of with those academic topics. If you want a list of topics, we provide them. We go over that in that webinar I mentioned earlier, which is CAEL Get the Facts. So we have a big list of all sorts of ideas for academic topics. And then you'll also see past test questions on these webinars. So again, it gives you a sense of sort of the complexity of the language. Yeah, so make sure you're listening to something academic, but it's a good way to do a little bit each day when you're going to one.
I don't think that, so I listen to podcasts too, and I feel like I have the same problem that you mentioned in terms of like a wandering mind, but somehow it's harder, it's easier when I listen to it than when I read, because I used to have like a voracious appetite for reading, and then it just stopped after a while because I can't get myself to focus and finish a book because I'm always thinking of something else. But somehow with podcasts, because it's in your ear and it's just like you can just keep doing whatever you want, and then that you're so feeding information, like podcasts really help. And it's not academic, but you can listen to a lot of like classic tales, which are my favorite. It may be boring for people, but they do talk about like a lot of old books, and I would never read a classic tale because I wouldn't read it, but I can listen to it.
Yeah.
So that helps me with my vocabulary. So you can try that out too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know, like learning styles, some of us are auditory learners, and it sounds like you are. You can retain that. I myself, I prefer to see the word on the page. So we're opposite. I have a harder time, even though the bud is in my ear and I can hear someone talking. All of a sudden I'm thinking about, what am I going to have for supper tonight? And, where will I run today? And all of a sudden I've missed. So this is that on the CAEL test. That would be terrible. I wouldn't do well for listening because you have to focus, right? So once again, we have to practice these skills. So listening each day in a way that you're focused, sometimes taking notes, right? When you're listening to these podcasts, you're developing your vocab. But if you're actually listening and writing down the important details, it forces you to listen better. So that works for me best. So that's something that I'll encourage you to do as well. If you
also a good tip for people who are taking the test, because you get you can get to know how to write notes as well.
Yeah. So again, doing it all in one study session. So you're maximizing your time and preparing more.
Okay. So since, let's say that we've made a schedule, we've made like a systematic way of learning, have a guide, and then moving, like once we have done that, once we've practiced, what are some ways that we can keep track of our progress, of our CAEL progress?
I think the easiest way to do this is actually easy for you as well, is I would take there's a free practice test I mentioned on the CAEL.ca website. So I would take that test after you've seen the introductory webinar. See how you do. The test will score the reading and the listening sections. You won't get a specific feedback score for your speaking and writing, but at least you can practice those skills and you'll see the checklist that the raters will use to assess you. So I would encourage you to record your voice as you're speaking and then keep a copy, of course, of the written sample that you're doing for the test. So that's sort of your check-in with yourself. It's your self-assessment. So you do the test. It's about 3 hours. So it also shows you what it's like to sit for such a long time and produce all that hard work. And then you set up this routine we've been talking about. So ideally, I'm hoping you've got several months to study your reading, your writing, your vocab, take more webinars, do some more practice. After sufficient practice, what I'd like you to do is go back and take that free practice test again. Do the exact same test. See how you do this time. So you're going to have your scores from the first time, and you're going to have your scores from this time. And hopefully, crossing fingers, your scores have gone up significantly. So that's, if that happens, when that happens, right? Being positive, when that happens, it will boost your own self-esteem and make you feel confident. Don't do this the day before the test. That would be a terrible idea, because imagine if you had a bad day and you didn't do so well on that second try, that would crush your spirit. So I would give yourself lots of time, check in, take that test again. If your scores have gone up significantly, great, you're on your way for that test. If your scores are still a little bit low, that's okay too. It just means that you've got more practice to do. So you're building that time into that routine anyway. So hopefully you still got several weeks left. And if it was the reading that was low, well, then that's now where you're going to focus more of your time. If you've done very, very well on listening, you don't have to spend as much time practicing. So you've got to be flexible, I guess. But yeah, track your progress, see how your scores change and improve, hopefully. And then you'll be able to adapt your plan from there, pending your time and your ability at that stage.
Wonderful. So we have a question here from one of our, Jimmy again. What would be some differences between the Canadian and the US accent?
That is an interesting question. Jimmy, it really depends where they live in Canada or the States. So again, right now I live in Vancouver, which is really close to the border with the United States. So people who live just below the border, say in Seattle, Washington, they sound very, very almost identical to the way I sound. I've visited Seattle before and people didn't know that I was Canadian. It's that similar. But if you go down to, say, the southern states, there's a very, very noticeable, I call it, I don't want to sound like I would say like a twang.
Yeah.
I don't mean that to sound in a derogatory way, but there's a very distinct, it's almost like a southern, we call it a southern accent, because they live in the south of the States. So it's very, very different. And even myself, like listening to someone speak from one of those states, I have to listen a lot more carefully. And I don't even catch everything they say. There are sometimes words they pronounce where I'm not sure, because I don't hear that accent often enough. And vice versa. I'm sure they would say the same here. If you go to the maritime provinces here in Canada, which is on the East Coast, so I'll use Newfoundland as an example. I've got a great high school friend from Newfoundland. So hi, Sean, if you're listening. They do talk with a very distinct dialect, I guess, or accent all to their own. So some of my friends I have met over the years, I haven't a clue what they're saying. And we're all from Canada, right? We have such different dialects and ways of speaking. So it's like that all over the world, right? Certain places just have a very distinct dialect. So that's why I guess on the CAEL test for the listening, we've at least made a consistent accent. So we wouldn't have a very specific or unique dialect. We want everyone to have sort of the same exposure to those accents. So again, when we say typically Canadian on the CAEL, it'd be more like how I guess my accent is sounding.
Which is, to be honest, before I can't tell the difference between like an American, unless it's a Southern accent. I can't tell the difference between an American and a Canadian accent. So I would say it's kind of the same.
Yeah, in some cases.
Yes, definitely. I mean, if you go to Boston, it's completely different.
Yeah, right.
It's also interesting how it works with settlements. Like you said, Maritimes, Newfoundland, you mentioned a lot of them are like Irish settlements. So there is some of that accents as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. This is, I think, during the test. What if I don't understand a word I read in a paragraph? How do I work around it?
Yeah, so first thing I would recommend on the test itself is determine if you actually need to know the meaning of that word. It's a very good chance that it doesn't matter. So if you don't need that exact word to answer the question, skip it and move on. In the test, your job is not to start learning new words. Your job is to get through the test as quickly and efficiently as you can. If, on the other hand, though, that word in the answer choice or in the question is crucial, you need to know that word in order to answer the question. This is where you're going to have to use some of those vocabulary skills we talked about earlier today. Look at the word in the sentence, determine if it's, say, the action or maybe a descriptive word, and look at the other words within that sentence. I'm hopeful that there will be some other words that you do understand. So by focusing on what those other words mean, it should allow you to make an educated guess as to the meaning of this new word. And in a testing situation, that's really all you can do at that time. You can't, turn to a dictionary clearly and look it up. That would not be allowed on the test. So you're going to have to trust your own instinct and use the rest of the vocab to guide yourself to choosing the answer that's probably correct. You are making a guess, but I'm hoping with those 4 answer choices, say in multiple choice, you can eliminate a couple answers that you know are wrong. And even if you can limit it down to 2 answers that are left, take a guess. It's a 50-50 chance. If you get lucky, you'll get a point, but it's the best you can do in that situation. And it probably will happen. I will say the CAEL is academic, and I'm sure there will be words on the test that you've not heard before. So again, do your best with that and just, trust your instinct. Focus on what you do know and use that to guide you with the words that you don't, I guess.
Thank you. And I think those are great tips. Again, for the people who are watching, we're talking about at the test, during the test. And there's another question. The last question I have is also about when a person is attempting the CAEL test. In terms of writing, in the writing section, what are some tips that you can give us to organize our writing in a systematic way?
Yeah, so on CAEL, you're going to do 2 pieces of writing. First off, they come in parts 4 and 5 of the test. The first piece you're going to do is like an essay question. You'll probably have about 4 paragraphs to write. So the first tip that's going to help you understand what it is you're going to be writing about is to make a little outline. So rather than just start typing away your exact answer, take a minute, maybe 3 or 4 minutes anyway. You've got 35 minutes total. So take, say, 3 or 4 minutes and consider what it is you plan on talking about in the essay itself. So your introduction is going to state the opinion that you have. So you need to determine that right away. Write that down on a piece of paper. The testing administrators will give that to you. So identify your position, which is your opinion. Write it down. The next 2, possibly 3 paragraphs are all going to identify main ideas from either the reading or the listening that you did that are going to support your opinion. So just take a second and jot down the 2 main ideas, say, that you're going to use that will inform those 2 middle paragraphs. The very last paragraph is just a conclusion, sort of like a summary. So don't worry about that to get started. But if you can at least jot down your opinion, your main ideas, and then start pulling out a couple of specific examples from the text, in about 4 minutes, you should be able to finish that outline. And if you want some more help with outlining, we have covered that on the CAEL Prep with Brandy. So you can go back to that series and look at the writing outlines there. All right, so that's step number 1. Use that outline then to actually take ideas to start writing out the essay. Another visual tip that I'm going to share with you, it sounds a bit silly, but it's always worked for me as I was learning English and now teaching it as well. I call it the sandwich technique. So it's clearly not academic. But when you think of what a sandwich looks like, there's a top crust and a bottom crust, right? A bread and everything in between, the filling. So whatever you like on your sandwich, whether it's turkey and lettuce and tomato and cheese or whatever it is, that's in the middle. So if you can visualize what a sandwich looks like, think of the 2 crusts as your introduction and conclusion. Now, the crusts of a bread are the same size and shape. So that helps you remember that whatever you introduce in your first paragraph, you're going to be summarizing later. It's the same idea. You're just using different words, right? So you're not repetitive. So once you've got that established, all the filling of your sandwich are going to inform all of those specific details and examples that you'll be writing about in the middle paragraphs. You probably have a couple of middle paragraphs. So if you're eating a sandwich that only has a slab of turkey on it and that's it, well, that's a pretty boring sandwich, isn't it? So if you've only got one detail in the middle of your essay, that's not a very strong essay. On the other hand, if you like to add your turkey, your cheese, your avocado, your tomato, your lettuce, well, that's 5 fillings right there. So if I can have, 5 specific examples that support my opinion, and if I establish those in the middle of my essay, well, then I've got a very tasty sandwich. So again, it's kind of an elementary type example, but that visual has always helped me imagine exactly what I'm going to structure my essay like. And I guess when you get to the short writing in part 5, you're writing only 1 paragraph. You can still use that sandwich technique, but you've only got 1 paragraph this time. So the crust of the bread, right, 2 ends, are going to represent your topic sentence and the concluding sentence. Those 2 sentences, the first and last sentence, will say the same thing. You're introducing the idea, you're summarizing the idea. And again, all those details in the middle of that paragraph represent your filling. So I don't know if you've heard that one before, Ashwati, but that's my fun way to understand how a paragraph or an essay can be structured. Something different.
I love it. I love that. I'm already thinking about how am I going to take this information and make sure that everybody in this CAEL universe knows about this, because it's an amazing technique, and I think it's going to really help, especially students, like you said. This is a great way for them to think about it, because who doesn't like a sandwich? You're gonna remember this. Okay, so. Thank you, Brandy, for joining us. That was our last question. And as always, we are very happy to have you here. And thank you for helping us and helping our student audience. We really appreciate your expertise.
Excellent. My pleasure. We'll see you another time. Bye-bye.
Bye. So if you still have questions, please comment below and we can address it on our next episode. As I said earlier, Brandy also provides CAEL Test lessons on a separate playlist. It is called CAEL Prep with Brandy. She provides lessons on academic reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And if you still want more practice, we also have weekly online courses on our website, which Brandy also mentioned. Our website is cael.ca, and they are provided in a webinar format and are designed to help you achieve your desired score. I will link it in the description below. If you are an international student living abroad or in Canada, you may be eligible for the CAEL Scholarship. If you took the CAEL test on or after July 2020, or if you're planning to take it in the near future, please do check us out. I will link our scholarship page in the description below as well. And if you have any questions about it, please ask me in the comments. Some of you were asking about CAEL Test being available internationally. We are working really hard to make sure that CAEL is available internationally. We have you can now take the CAEL test at home. It's called CAEL Online, and we're working to make sure that it is available in many different countries. At the moment, it is available in the US and Canada. Our next episode will be on Thursday, 4th of December at 11 a.m. PST. Please join us and also invite anybody else who is interested in studying in Canada. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for future videos. Until then, please stay safe and have a nice weekend. Bye.